Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Executive Subcommittee of the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee on Friday, the 23rd of October 2020. I'd like to welcome you all, and I'd like to welcome any members of the public who are viewing today. And could we begin with a roll call vote of the members present?
Thank you, Convener. Members, can I ask you to confirm that you're present when I call out your name? Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Duff.
Present.
Councillor Lane.
Present.
And Councillor Parrott.
Present.
Convener, all members are present.
Thank you very much. And I take it we move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest on any of the items on the agenda this afternoon? There are no declarations written in the chat book, and there are no other declarations nominated. So we then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 3, which is an update on the Town Centre Fund. And I'm unsure as to exactly which officer is going to introduce that. So I pass on to whomever wishes to introduce.
So Councillor Lyle, Alison Seggie will introduce the paper, and with your agreement, there are a couple of points I would like to make once Alison's concluded her introduction. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Alison Seggie, please.
Afternoon, everyone. I'll just give you a very brief summary of the report. Members will recall that we received funding from Scottish Government in early 2019, an announcement of the Town Centre Fund. To allocate that funding, we held an elected member workshop back in the 25th of March 2019. We came up with a wide range of projects that were discussed by various points. A report was brought forward to the SPNR committee back in June 2019, and 5 projects were awarded funding. This report essentially gives you an update on progress with those 5 projects, some of which have not progressed as they would have hoped. So initially, this report is looking for approval to reallocate some of the funding that was originally allocated to a couple of the projects that cannot proceed at the moment. And also, as an update, we received just last month an indication of a further allocation of funding from the Town Centre Fund from the Scottish Government of 714,000. And in summary, this paper also provides a list of options that funding could be utilised for. And the conclusions and recommendations suggest that we bring forward a further report in terms of that additional funding to the next committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. And can I ask the Chief Executive?
Thank you, Councillor Lyle, and thank you, Alison, for your introduction. Councillors, if I can just draw your attention to Table 1 under 1.6, and it notes that in Pitlochry there is insufficient progress. Officers and I have discussed this matter this morning, and I have spoken with some elected members. We would like to pursue the options as previously discussed in Pitlochry and bring an update report back, as Alison has outlined, to SPNR at the end of November with your agreement. Thank you, Councillor Lyle.
Okay, thank you very much. I would open up to questions. Councillor Lane. Councillor Lane.
Sorry, Convener, thanks for that. Thanks for letting me have the question, and thanks to Karen for that update. I'd like to know, Convener, either from yourself or the Vice Convener, is how we've got from the situation yesterday when these papers came out and when were made public, and less than 24 hours later, we've a project that's been on the go for 15 months can suddenly turn around in about 24 hours from being unviable, unable to move forward, and not enough progress. What has happened in the last 24 hours to change that situation? if either you or the Vice Convener could answer that, would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lane. I'm not sure that there has been a definite conclusion that any particular project has gone from being unviable to viable in 24 hours. That would be my only response to that at the moment, and I don't think it's appropriate for the Vice Convener. It might be one of the officers would wish to respond.
Councillor Lyle, I'm happy to respond on behalf of officers. I think that the time the paper was written, I think it would be fair to say that we hadn't necessarily made the progress in Pitlochry that we would have liked to have seen with the project. We will try to move matters on at pace and look at how we can engage with some of the key stakeholders and, as I say, bring back a report in November. That's certainly by no means a commitment from me that we will be able to work magic and make the project viable, but I do think there's more that we can do to explore short and longer term measures in Pitlochry. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. I will go to Councillor Bailey and I will come back to Councillor Lane shortly. Councillor Bailey.
Okay, thank you, Convener. So my question really follows on to Councillor Lane's question to the extent that the paper as written says that for the Pitlochry project that we have £383,000 therefore to reallocate. Does that mean that we should therefore read the paper as though we don't have that money to relocate, and the officer recommendation is now that we should consider the Pitlochry project as being something that's on the agenda and we can decide to proceed with if we so wish to?
That would be my interpretation of what's been said this morning, Councillor Bailey.
Okay.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks again, Convener, and the SNP group are totally behind moving forward with Pitlochry, and if the officers, if we want to question officers as to why it was unviable, as was stated in the paper that came out yesterday, my question still hasn't been answered as to what has changed. Something must have changed from when the paper was written, or when the pre-agenda that I would expect obviously yourself and the Vice Convener to be at. Something has changed from the pre-agenda through to the issue of the full papers to the next day when we've come to discuss them. We're now discussing a totally different scenario from what was published to the put in the public domain yesterday. So I'm again ask what has changed since they were put in the public domain. Thanks.
Again, thank you for your question, Councillor Lane. I have not been privy to the discussions which would indicate what has changed, so I'm unable to answer your questions other than I believe there has been some comment that I was informed of earlier that some local members had queried the recommendations in the report, and as these Pitlochry in particular was one of the projects that we had highlighted through the previous SP&R committee, then it seemed reasonable that we bring that back, or if you like, defer slightly to reconvene as soon as possible to actually determine this one. If there is any opportunity to enhance the facilities in Pitlochry, I'd be delighted to take them as leader of the council. So therefore I would like to explore every opportunity. And that's where we are at the moment. I see you have a further question, Councillor Lane. Well,
it's a supplementary, really, that I've still, so as I could go and explain to people in the public who have got in touch with us over the last evening, and we have a local member present who would be at pre-agenda and would have flagged this up, I would have thought, at a previous stage. I still don't understand, and maybe it would have to be an officer to answer, that what has changed in the officer's mind from yesterday, or the writing of the paper, which would be in the previous week, but we only got sight of it at 2 o'clock yesterday, to this now, well, we could maybe move forward. That's the question, and I only want to know, something has changed, and I'd like to know what it is.
I think from my perspective, Councillor Lane, that I keep, as these projects were previously selected, And as I've had some concerns raised to me from other parties, is what I would say, then I am keen to give every opportunity to progress the project in Pitlochry. So therefore, I think it is reasonable of this committee to, if you like, put that decision to one side for the time being and bring it back at the first opportunity to the SP&R committee, and to try and, if possible, move it forward. If not, then so be it. But just to take one last opportunity, I think is competent. And that is my response to your question. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I'm going to bang the same drum a bit, if I may, but perhaps in a different way. I'm just wondering whether at this stage we can be informed as to the nature of the problems that are affecting the Pitlochry project. Is this to do with third parties' willingness to take part or provide land or facilities? I would welcome, if you like, understanding the nature of the problem that is affecting this project, if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief Executive to respond.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lyle, Councillor Parrott and Councillor Ling, thank you for your question. If I can perhaps just give some context. So over a number of months, officers have been trying to make contact with one of the landowners in Pitlochry to progress the project that was laid out following consultation with local elected members and indeed the community. Unfortunately, we've not been able to make progress with one of the landowners. When I was alerted yesterday by one of the local elected members, I spoke with the team and we recognised that actually we need to scope out whether there's a potential project within Pitlochry that doesn't necessarily require the explicit agreement of one of the landowners, whether we can do something for people in Pitlochry, as Councillor Lyle has outlined. So I hope that gives some context and some background, and I thank the local ward member for bringing it to my attention, because I do think we need to give it one last try to see if there's something that we can bring forward. Hence why I'd like to bring forward a report at the end of November to SP&R. So I hope that gives you some background and some assurance that we will try to do all we possibly can for Pitlochry from an officer perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, if I may. That's a very positive clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lane, you have an amendment.
Convener, just a reminder that we're still at the question stage, so we're not quite at the stage of motions or amendments yet.
Okay. Any further questions? There are no further questions. Do we have any other comments? Or do we have an amendment?
Thank you again, Convener. My amendment would be that we continue with the paper and we can take a vote whether to continue with the project in Pitlochry, which I think is...
Sorry, Convener, just to interject again, we haven't...
if it's a comment...
amendment, but the convener hasn't actually moved the paper yet, so I think we need to wait until the conveners move the paper.
Sorry, I'm happy to move the paper as is and as was indicated by myself and officers. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder for the motion?
Sorry, Convener. Sorry, Convener, it's difficult to get my microphone off. I'm happy to move the paper with that amendment to the Pitlochry project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to second, sorry.
Okay, my apologies. Councillor Lane, do you wish to...
Yeah, my amendment is... No, still happy to go with an amendment that we instruct officers to find a viable project that's maybe 90% there, and they push the other 10% to ensure it. I think it sends the wrong message to defer it and look at it again. We've had 15 months to look at it. I think the money that's allocated to Pitlochry should stay there, and the project should be given the go-ahead today. So that's my amendment. Along with, I accept all the rest of the offers in the paper, and I'm especially glad to see the one with the extra money going to Cooper Angus, which I think is a really worthwhile project. So my amendment is solely to accept the other recommendations, but to not just defer or put back for further information about the Pitlochry project, but to continue with it as it is at the moment, not to take the money away from it at this stage.
Thank you. And just can I confirm that if that is subject to legal challenge and legal cost by the council, where would that funding come from?
Why would it be subject to legal cost if Lisa Simpson could tell?
If there's a bad neighbour issue?
But they don't need to be on that part, is my understanding. That's why I'd like to discuss it with officers before we get there. I think that the project can take place on one side of the burn. Councillor Duff will probably know a lot better than myself. I don't think there's any bad neighbour issue, but maybe Lisa Simpson or legal could clarify if there's going to be something like that.
To clarify before we make any further.
Yeah, I don't think that members are far apart on this. I think one of the issues that we have, which was why there was the initial recommendation that we couldn't progress it, was because we cannot make progress with the landowner, and we have no power to compel the landowner to engage with us in any way, shape or form. So by virtue of that, then we may not be able to deliver the project as originally intended, because of the situation that's out with our control, i.e. the situation that we've got in being unable to progress matters with the landowner. What we've heard today is an undertaking from the Chief Executive, who said that she wants to go and have a look at the project again, emphasising our commitment to doing what development we can in Pitlochry so that we don't lose out this opportunity for funding for them, that we need to go and look, but we may need to materially alter what the project is, if the project as currently scoped is dependent upon the agreement of a landowner who we can't engage with. So at this particular point, we are happy to go and look in principle at the project and to report back with what we can do and what we can deliver and what the alternative options may be. But there would be a difficulty in compelling us to do something which, as officers, we're telling you for 15 months we've not managed to achieve, because we can't engage with parties whom we can't compel to work with us, and we have no control over that particular aspect. So I think the point that you're, without putting words into your mouth, Councillor Lang, you're clearly keen that the ongoing commitment to delivering a project in Pitlochry is maintained, and you want to secure that in principle today. I don't think any other elected member is saying or suggesting otherwise, and neither is an officer. I think the difficulty that we have, though, is the factual problem with the fact that we might not be able to deliver the project as was originally envisaged because we can't get the engagement to do that. So in terms of the competency of the amendment, I'm struggling to accept as competent being compelled to do something that we're telling you we cannot deliver. But I do appreciate the sentiment, and I think we're happy to say that we're working on delivering a project, but the only way that we can give you any indication of what that might look like is if you give us the time and the space to report back to you at the next committee.
Well, thank you for that clarification. I'm happy. My worry is 15 months down the line, if there'd been drive from the administration or drive from officers, I think we would have been able to get a definite situation today. I don't see what's going to change in the next, well, we don't have a time frame, 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months. Money's got to be committed by a certain time. How much longer do we need before we get to a position? We're 15 months down the line.
Councillor Lyle, can I please speak? Councillor Lang, I accept your points, but it's unacceptable to criticise officers in public forum. I'd like you to retract that, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean, and I do apologise, it was criticism. I was just wondering how we'll manage to move it along in such a quick time if we've not managed to move it along. And what time frame are we having here, Chief Executive?
So, Councillor Lang, this is my responsibility to oversee progress. And because it was brought to my attention last night by another ward member, I will commit to overseeing this and bringing back all the information by November, the SPNR committee.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd just like to remind you, Councillor Lane, that a significant number of officers have been redeployed during the COVID pandemic over the last 6 months. And unfortunately, not every item of business that was on the agenda has been cleared up in the time that we had all hoped. But hopefully you will understand the situation, and I hope you will also appreciate the commitment from myself and the Chief Executive that we will bring this back and we will deal with it as quick as possible. And I appreciate your criticism for me and not bringing this back with a resolution today.
Well, thanks for that then, Convener. I'll withdraw my amendment, but on the understanding and accept the Chief Executive and your own commitment to bring it forward. I'm more concerned about the time frame. We've already asked for an extension of a year from the Scottish Government for this money, and I wouldn't want it to drift by. So thanks, and I apologise again if it was construed as I was in any way undermining officers or criticising them about it's just a time frame that I was concerned about, and I was wondering how we're going to achieve it. But I do believe if yourself and the Chief Executive give that commitment, I'm happy to accept that and we can move on. Thank you. I'm happy to move on, but I would also like to remind all members of the committee that we have been under emergency powers. We have been in exceptional circumstances for the past 6 months, and I thank the efforts of the officers in managing all the raft of issues that were new to them throughout this pandemic. We have Councillor Parrott.
Sorry, Convener, I put a point of clarification prior to Councillor Parrott's intervention.
Councillor Bailey, then. Sorry, yep.
Thank you, Convener. My point of clarification is as follows. Now that the amendment was withdrawn, I'm presuming the motion is as it's written on the paper, which is an open-ended recommendation. So I'm looking now at recommendation 4. It says that the Executive Subcommittee should consider the potential project options to essentially spend the remaining £640,000. If we're to incorporate the Pitlochry item, that then leaves £257,000 on the table for us to consider. So my point of clarification is, Convener, can you clarify please what the motion is, because I may wish to amend it if the motion is that we will leave £257,000 of this funding on the table.
I think the clarification would be the measure as with the commitment from following the commitment from the Chief Executive and myself that we would bring forward the Pitlochry project if possible and try and deliver it or deliver part of it, but equally it is a commitment to that project. The 257,000 we have asked in the recommendations to consider it and ask officers to consider the 257,000 and bring recommendations, given that that is a smaller pot of money where we can use that funding to best effect.
Okay, I'll likely have an amendment, but I'll take time to consider that while you take the other comments. Thank you, Convener.
Okay. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. My comment, if you like, was along the same lines as that of Councillor Bailey, and I was wondering at what point in this discussion we were going to consider that potential allocation of the remaining amount, that now being 257k, or were those potential allocations simply going to be considered as comments to the paper? Thank you.
I think given the changes to the paper and the Pitlochry situation over the preceding period, then I think it's appropriate that we have comments to the paper rather than an amendment at this stage. Councillor Duff.
My microphone. Thank you, Convener. No, I just wanted to say I welcome the comments from yourself and Chief Executive today. There is a project which has been it's been frustrating over the period of time. We do have a consensus, I think, amongst the various parties to the discussions and the consultation events that we held. It has been, as I say, frustrating over the period of time, and I'm grateful for the efforts of the officers to try and resolve the issues that have caused the delays that we've seen, and I welcome the opportunity to try and give this one last shot at trying to implement it within the timescales that remain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we move down, we have an amendment from Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. I appreciate the changes that you've made to the paper, and I fully support the inclusion of further exploration of the Pitlochry items, so I'm not in any way challenging that. So I'm amending the paper as it is right now, not as written. But I further think that we should give officers and the community the certainty of where we intend to invest the remainder of the 275,000 at this point, rather than waiting until a later date, so that we can go ahead and start to plan for that investment and make sure we don't end up in another sort of last chance saloon like we are right now. Therefore, I would like to move an amendment that we would go ahead and actually also remit officers to proceed with the following projects which are outlined in the list of options. And those would be the Lochleven item at £20,000, the YMCA item at £25,000, and the full fibre rollout option at £200,000, leaving a small amount on the table. But I appreciate there isn't a particular project that would fill that gap. So that's my amendment, that we essentially proceed with Lochleven, YMCA and full fibre, and give commitments on those at this point in time, rather than waiting until a later date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a seconder?
I hadn't pre-arranged one because we didn't know what the motion would look like until a few moments ago, but I'm happy to take anyone who's happy to formally second that. Thank you, Convener.
Okay.
I see Councillor Parrott's beat me to it, wishing to second, Convener.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion.
May I speak to that?
Yes, you may. Sorry, my apologies. Yep.
Thank you very much, Convener. No, I'm happy to second this amendment with regard to those particular projects, having, if you like, done the mathematics of putting the money for the Pitlochry project back into the main sum. I, as with Councillor Bailey, had put ticks next to the local fibre network, the Perth YMCA, and the Kinross project for support. So I'm very happy to second the amendment made by Councillor Bailey there. Thank you.
Just can I get clarification in that the Lochleven project is included in the motion?
I'm referring, Convener, to the additional 20,000 that's mentioned in the further for the connecting. It's the additional element for Lochleven.
No.
Okay. Do we have a comment on any comments, other comments on the amendment? I'm content with the majority of the amendment. In my view, it is reasonable, and I'm particularly keen to support the full fibre network rollout, I would say. And given that we are at this late stage, I think I would be happy to incorporate the amendment into the motion if Councillor Duff is in agreement.
Yes, Convener, I think you are correct though. The additional £20,000 for the Lochleven project is already part of the motion. Okay. And it's not included in the balance of funds. I think, Alistair, if you just check item 2 at 3.3.
Yeah, I'm reading page 8, the table 2, and it says connecting Lochleven with Kinross Town Centre, request for additional £20,000. That's the one I'm referring to. But if it's already incorporated and I missed it, then I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Yeah, 3.3 number 2, an additional 20k is provisionally allocated to the Lochleven Kinross project, subject to tender submissions. So
okay,
that's already.
We're all pushing for the same thing. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. So, just for clarity, the other points in your amendment, I'm happy to incorporate, Alistair, if you're content with that, and Councillor Duff is content, and Councillor Parrott is content with that. Because I think
agreed. Thank you, Convener.
Okay.
Agreed.
Happy to agree?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think that will be helpful for officers moving forward as we prepare to bring the work forward on the Pitlochry project and hopefully bring that back to committee as soon as possible. So thank you all very much for your attendance, and for the rest of this meeting we move into private session. So I'd like to thank any members of the public who are watching today and close the meeting. Thank you very much.